All right. Well,
Yeah.
we are live then.
All right.
Hey.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to DGG Presents Random Encounters. Joining us again is Brian, Gark the Bard, and we're just going to talk about some TTRPG stuff. I
Yes.
did not warn Brian about this, but I'm throwing him to the wolves right off the bat here.
Hey.
Because Brian was part of a collaboration with some other creators, and they set something up that's live on DM's Guild and got up at least to number 5 on the
We are
hot list.
I'll say we are actually, as of 9 my time, so 6 your time, we are number 4 on most popular.
Ooh, number
So
4 most popular.
Heck yeah.
All right, so yeah, give everybody a little rundown about what this is and what your contribution was. Let's start there.
Oh yeah. So Nocturnes and Nightmares, it came about mostly off of a bunch of us that met in the Cove. I know that you're in the Cove now. For
Mhm.
those that don't know about the Cove, it is a Discord server where if you are a TTRPG creator of any sort, be it, you're a writer, you do blogging like I do, you make games, you're a musician, you can come and you can find other people to work with, and kind of collaborate, share with one another. We were in there, and then Anthony, who he goes by Epic Blunders, um, kind of started pulling people together to work on a Halloween project. And I originally got pulled because I have a post that kind of talks about how to run horror in 5e. So they were like, "Well, you wrote about horror. Like, would you like to jump in, work on this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, this sounds great." So we slowly but surely accumulated people. We got a couple artists on hand, um,
Um,
and we just kind of started working.
so apparently I'm supposed to tell you you can't be here. You have writing to do, Brian.
Who's saying that?
Wanderwell.
Oh God!
Don't know who it is, but when we get a comment from the chat that I think is funny, I gotta share it. So, anyways, you can't be here. You have
I
writing
just
to
won't
do.
be. I won't be sleeping. That's probably how it'll work out.
The sign of a true creator.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, what was your contribution to this collaboration? What did you specifically do?
I jumped in on a lot of stuff, but the big contribution I had was at the very end. We do have a section on how to run horror in 5e, and I kind of um, wrote that from my experiences with running Curse of Strahd for the time that I have run um, that. And then there are some small things in there, like I helped out with items, monsters, and then I just generally was around for the rest of the project.
Very cool.
So the other thing too is the backstory to kind of the title, at least, or the theory here. I found that really interesting. You want to give them a
Yeah, so
rundown of
we
what that
actually we
was?
went back and forth a lot on what name to use. Um and literally it was Halloween project for the longest time until we finally sat down and started going back and forth on the names. And we finally got down to wanting to go with either Baba Yaga or Baba Lysaga. And if people are not familiar with Baba Lysaga, she is a character that comes up in Curse of Strahd.
Mhm.
And that's about all I'm going to say about that because, no Curse of Strahd spoilers here.
Yep.
And as we kind of like leaned into the idea of having um, either Baba Yaga or Baba Lysaga, we kind of went into turning this into more of like this was part supplement for you, but also this was the book that she kept her nursery rhymes and have you in them in and just would read them. So we kind of really leaned into the creepy aspect there that you get with witches and hags like that.
Very cool.
Oh yeah, it's been a blast, and it's been really fun working with the entire group. Is extremely talented. So to see how everybody kind of sees horror and to bring it all together to make one cohesive horror experience, I mean, the locales in there are they are fantastic. Highly recommend checking it out. We have, everything from a world that was destroyed by a demon incursion to a place that was split in twain when a hag coven turned against one another, and the
Oh.
kind of dark fantasy that comes from
Ooh.
that. But I mean, there are tons of others. We have, our own art from Jen, who goes by, I believe, Syrup Knight on Twitter. Um, did some fantastic art in there, as well as some other folks. I can give you the names of everybody after the fact, but yeah, and for me, this is really exciting because this is the first project I've had that has ended up published. Um, and on top of that, going to the DMs Guild.
Mhm.
So to see it up, to see it doing pretty well, being very popular, seeing a lot of people kind of respond and saying, this is really awesome, like having a lot of fun with this just in time for Halloween. It's great,
Yeah,
fantastic.
that's really cool.
Yeah, I posted a link in the chat to it on DM's Guild for anybody that wants to take a look. I'm gonna kind of call myself out here a little bit. They did a little promo on Twitter where they had you guess who participated in. Yeah, Brian knows where this is going. Who they had you guess who produced what section of it, and they had a letter for the creator, and you had to tie it to the project. I had the great distinction of going 0 for 7 in my guesses. I should have taken Brian's advice. Brian's advice that he posted to everyone was to their mayor. I think it
I
was
think,
you.
yeah,
Might
I
have been
think
somebody
multiple
else, maybe
people said
multiple of
that,
you.
like,
But
yeah, you go.
yeah, check out people's tweets, and there might be some hints as to what they were working on. Now, of course, I shot from the hip, and I was like, okay, I have a pretty good feeling about this based on some of the other stuff that these people did and some of the other creations they've done or are
Mhm.
working on. I was like, I think I got a couple of these, and come to find out, boom, goose egg.
Yeah, you picked me for the gloom, which
Yeah.
I was definitely flattered by because the gloom is fantastic psychological horror. Really cool
Nice.
concept. Um,
It seemed up your alley from our conversation, so I was like, this is
oh,
a good chance this has got to be his. But
yeah,
I don't know everybody involved. I've talked with you.
uh,
We've done a game with Stasia, and those are the only people I've had a lot of active interactions with outside of Twitter posts. So
but yeah, no, it's fantastic. I've run the adventures in it. I was helping playtest, so I kind of offered up my group. I said to my group, I was like, "Hey, do you want to take a break from Curse of Strahd and try out some promo material? Like, kind of need your feedback on this."
Mhm.
And they were like, "Yeah, sure. Like, we would love to make new characters because we've been playing Curse of Strahd for years. At this point, it feels like forever." But and it was exciting to jump in and take a look. And the worlds are just, it is so fun to jump into these worlds because they're all distinct and they all really build on that horror experience.
yeah, I've been following it as it's been going, seeing the people posting about it. Was waiting for the go live. There's been a lot of people talking about it. I mean, obviously
Mhm.
it's number 4 on most popular. It's just been steadily climbing because it's been out for what, a
Yeah,
little
we went
over a week
live
now.
last Friday, so we are coming up on 1 week up on
Nice.
DMG. Yeah,
Coming up on
yeah,
a week. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of
yeah,
movement. Less than a
yeah,
week and up to number 4. That's huge. That's like
yeah.
props to all of you
We had a
involved.
jump
But
today, which was
yeah,
awesome.
Heck yeah.
Um, Yeah, and it's been fun for me just watching this and seeing the spike and seeing people get it and just going, this is awesome. Like people are buying my thing and they're enjoying my thing.
Right. Mm. It
that's that. I mean, that's
it
Yeah.
that's the
definitely
goal
gives
of
you
any
that
creator, right?
validation. You're like, hey, my content is actually good.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's just, yeah, it's I said to somebody, I said it's a surreal feeling to see it up and seeing it doing so well.
It's super cool. I'm definitely picking up my copy as soon as I can.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely do. It's fantastic and perfect for this time of year.
Well, I mean, really, it's perfect for any time of the year. But that that's just
I
me.
I always say that, like, and because I'm like, it's Halloween horror, but I'm like, yeah, I live in horror
Hmm.
all the time.
Yep.
That's yeah.
Yeah, you and Don have a similar outlook there. Like I don't dislike horror. I haven't done a whole lot of it, but it's not
Hmm.
something like I seek out,
Yeah.
you know. But so, like Don's got a Curse of Strahd game we started, and you can ask him. I kind of dove right in with a very dark
It's the
character.
way to
Yep,
go with it. Like,
for sure.
let's just really lean into it. It's a
And
ton of fun.
yeah, so we'll see where it goes. But I know there's a lot of, like, I've been seeing there's a lot of horror, and like, yeah, this is perfect
Mhm.
type. This is
Yeah.
the season
Yeah.
for it for everybody. Is horror something at this time of year? Yeah. So let's see what else we got here. Um, I wanted to
Things.
touch a little bit on something and kind of get your guys' opinions of fiends. I mean, it is
And I
time of year
said
for fiends,
things,
but um,
things and stuff.
oh, things. See, the mind went right there. I thought I heard fiends. It fits. One of the things I've been seeing a little bit about is a little bit of the community discourse about the 1D&D playtest. The
Yeah.
thing specifically is people coming, saying that is not going to be backwards compatible.
Really.
And I can kind of see like where they're coming from, but at the same time, this is only the second playtest. This thing isn't going live until 2024. So we're gonna have more playtests coming. We've got at least, two more, three more groups
Hmm.
that
Mhm.
there's going to be a playtest thing for, and they've said that the current playtest material is supersedes the previous. So if something conflicts or something's not there, what's the current playtest material is what is actively what they're looking for feedback on.
Yeah.
They're not looking for feedback on previous releases of it.
Yeah.
And I do see some potential issues
Hmm.
with
The influence thing, for one.
backwards compatibility on a few things. I don't think that's really going to affect backwards compatibility. Is that a problem? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I
In
was
general, the
talking
influencing
about.
I see as a problem, yes. But
No, I don't think it.
the backwards compatibility thing though is
Yeah.
like,
I don't think that's going to be an
no, go
issue
for it.
so much as people. So my thing is what I see that might be a conflict is people getting into the 1D&D rule set and people that are coming in from 5e who are not used to those rules, and they're like, well, 1D&D is backward compatible, so I can take my 1D&D character and dump it into this 5e game, which is great in theory until the DM's like, I have no idea what these rules are. How am I going to manage this?
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
can see that.
I can see that being an issue. But that was just my thought.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, like I think that's very valid. That could be an issue because if people are, not following up on it, not paying attention, it's, or
Hmm.
if they don't get it when it comes out, could be a problem. But the biggest thing I've been seeing is people are saying the new rules, like the new things that we're playtesting, are not going to work backwards compatible
Hmm.
because there's significant changes to key abilities, like the
Yeah.
bardic inspiration
Yeah, fair.
is vastly different. So I can kind of see that. Also, the thing about, the DM can't crit, if that comes into the actual rules, what happens to a grave cleric?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And you do have to kind of wonder like what when Wizards is telling us, oh well, this new edition, whatever it's going to be, 1D&D, is going to be backwards compatible. We don't know exactly what that means. Is it,
No.
they're going to give us a small free PDF that lets us kind of go through and organize things, and is it going to be just like well, if you own this, we're going to release this copy to you. Um, and I don't know how extensive that's going to be and how much, it's going to be left up to the DM to go through and do all the work.
Yeah.
I
What
kind
it,
of I kind of lean more towards that, where they're going to be like, here's some formulas and things. So here you guys go. If you
well,
really want to play Storm King's Thunder, have at
yeah.
it.
I could also see them doing kind of what they did between 3 and 3.5, where they're like, it's compatible, and you just pick the rule set that makes sense for what you're doing, which was a mess. I'm not gonna lie. When we converted from 3 to 3.5, when they were trying to put all the band-aids on everything that was broken, it really messed with the game. There was like a couple of weeks at least where players would come up to me and they're like, "Hey, how do I fix this now that ambidexterity doesn't work this way anymore?" You know, and so
Yeah.
I can see where some of these systems are going to kind of fall on their face when it comes to
Well,
compatibility.
well, and my thing is, I think a lot of energy is being expended in absolutes and claims like this right now when we still don't know
No, we don't.
what the final product's going to be. Like,
Hmm.
I'm still of the mindset for me, it feels like they're using the spaghetti method here. They are taking all the ideas, all the noodles that they've got, and they want to see what happens, and they're going to throw it against the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, I
That is,
mean,
And I almost feel like in addition to doing that, they're also including things that they want to see what kind of response it gets.
okay.
Like somebody told me the other day, they were like, with the crit thing that everybody got upset about. Like, did they do that because it would make everybody upset? Because then you get to see, well, how important is it for crits to remain the
hmm
way they are? What is the community going to react to that? And two, for them, especially right now during the playtesting, you know, even if it's bad publicity where you have a whole bunch of content creators going, look at this bad take, it's going to make people look at it.
hmm
And you're going to look
true.
at the crits, but you're going to look at everything else as well.
Yeah, it generates that churn where
You
you
know,
get a larger subset of people evaluating the hot take rules.
that's valid. I hadn't actually thought about that or considered that one because I've been looking at everything as a whole, even the stuff that is potentially problematic.
Hmm.
Because Don shared something with me, and I had been thinking about this, but like if you combine the inspiration mechanics with the
Influence.
with influence, that's right, yeah, the influence mechanics with a natural 20 always succeeds.
Yeah, you get into some weird murky ground that you need to kind of explain.
Well,
And you go ahead,
yeah,
go.
I was just gonna say, well, yeah, then you run into things where you have like a low level party that all of a sudden befriends a CR20 something. That could be real
Yeah,
bad for a new DM, like real
yeah.
bad.
Oh, totally, totally. Because I
Mhm.
think one of the things that the DMG does not really do very well is like explaining like rules don't have to be absolute, and like you can do degrees of success and failure. And like I know if my
Yeah.
party were to get a natural 20 when talking to let's say party shows up, bard is in tow, and they've just done a job for the noble, and the bard is like, I want land, I want a title, and he goes right in and starts using that
Yep.
influence action, gets an actual 20. Um, for me, I'm gonna say, well, he's not gonna give it to you, but you've caught his attention.
hmm
And you think if you move forwards with that, he might be interested in working it out with you. But I know that because I've been playing a while and I can kind of improv like that. I think
Yeah.
especially yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just gonna say, yeah, you have like this spectrum where it starts at one gauge and it slowly starts building up to those really close relationships. Because I mean, when you're building relationships, especially with intelligent NPCs, and it's something that experience as a DM will get you is it's something that's a long-term project. It's not going to be instantaneous. But new DMs, they're going to
Mhm.
be, especially ones that are used to like the dialogue options and video games and that sort of thing. They're going to be like, oh, well, I guess his reputation's pegged out, so they get what they want, and it's going to really cause some friction and issues, I think.
Yeah, the game likes to play in absolutes. And I mean, just the way that DCs are built, there are rules for doing degrees of success and failure and doing complications, good and bad, but they're buried in the DMG.
Mm-hmm.
And they're buried, and like they never really talk about them all that much.
Yeah.
Like there was not this exact rule, but there was a similar rule that kind of went over this in the DMG, like a system in place for using this, and that was in the DMG, and that was a good place for it. Like what could be problematic is if they put this in like the player's handbook, then you're taking players and DM and
Yeah, now it's a player mechanic, not a DM mechanic.
yeah, and you've got the headbutting. It's supposed to like, well, this is what the rule says. I should have this. And it's like, no, this person just wanted to kill you. They're not going to be your best friend just because you got a nat 20. But the rule says, and it's like that's something that should be there. And like the DMG has a lot of good information in it that gets missed. It is probably the most widely purchased, least read book outside of maybe some college textbooks in history.
Yeah.
And because there's a lot of those little nuggets in there, like a lot of the questions you see people ask about DMing, well, how do I do this? Is there a mechanic for this? Yeah, DMG page, blah, blah, blah. Because it's not like it's in there, but finding it is not something that you can generally do quickly or easily unless you're familiar with it.
Oh,
so,
no,
like,
no. It's a mess. That's Stasia and I have been talking about that, and that's a project that we have that's upcoming. Is kind of making a primer for new GMs out there that like takes a look at the DMG and says like, this is great, but these are the specifics you should focus on first, because one of the things we've gone back and forth on them is the fact that there's all of this wonderful, fantastic information on building your own world, and that comes before a lot of like the very basic things for a DM. So it like immediately sets you up to start building your own world, which I don't know about you. That's to me like if you are just learning the basics of D&D, that is not a way to start. That is you are just jumping in the deep end, no floaties.
You start with a town. Yeah, or
and
better yet, a house. Like an inn. You pick a building and you start from there and work your way out.
I'm holding some optimism back for the one D&D DMG because Chris Perkins did specifically say he was taking an interest in it, and I have some optimism and some faith that he's going to make it more streamlined.
Here's
because hoping. Well, I mean, like honestly, these books were originally published in 2014, right?
Yeah, and they still follow the old reference manual style presentation.
And I think there's been enough conversation out there in the world or in the community about accessibility and making things easy for new people to get into and start with that they're paying attention.
I hope so.
So I've got some optimism there, and I'm gonna like cross my fingers and all that and hope it's just like organized in a better fashion. But anybody that's trying to get into 5e still or doesn't get into one D&D, I think could really benefit from something like Brian and Stasia are working on.
Yep.
And thinking about, because there's so many different things. Like we do DM tips. Brian is blogging his DM experience, which has a bunch of like tips and things he's learned throughout the process. And so many other people are doing similar things. Like, this is what I've learned in my experience. Oh, this is, like even some of the big YouTubers and other people like Jenny D, I think a month ago or something like that, did a thing about stuff that's in the DMG. That's, answers to a lot of your questions that that DMs have are in there. They're just hidden. And it's that whole reference manual way that it's laid out. Like it's laid out. It's laid out worse than a college textbook.
Oh, it's awful. It doesn't.
Yeah, it's in the vein and tradition of all the older D&D books, and they're really going to have to step away from that style, especially if they're going to start keeping up with some of the other producers and publishers that are out there. Like Evil Hat. Read an Evil Hat book. They're beautiful. Like
Or you,
Fate, Scum and Villainy, which is my new favorite system that I've been reading, which is a hack of Blades in the Dark. It's great.
well, like, yeah, just and with all the community content being made, they're gonna have to if they want to stay with it. Because a perfect example is Veil of the Void Reforged, which we just got to doing a playtest of this month. That book, it's a big book. It's probably comparable in size to the Player's Handbook in DMG.
Yeah.
But it's organized and it's easy to read, and the information in it is easy to find.
Yeah. And the guy who wrote it also took the time to hyperlink every single reference in the table of contents. So you can just click and go on the PDF.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's extremely well written.
Mm-hmm. Like he said, he's minorly dyslexic himself, and so he had that in mind, and he had people who were majorly dyslexic review the material and give him tips on like the character sheets and different things on how to make it easier for them to read with their disability.
Yeah, so it stands out better and it's a little bit more comprehensive.
It does not read like a reference manual. It's awesome. If you watch those or have watched those, you'll hear me say about how I was surprised about how easy it was to get into it and read it and get into it with the heft, because I was completely skeptical about, I don't think this is going to work with our system right now. I think it's going to take too much time. And no, we were able to do it.
Yeah.
And it was because of how easy it was to read the information he had. And also the system mechanics and everything were pretty easy once you got used to them, but just it was easy to read through. It was easy to find stuff, so you weren't spending all this time flipping back and forth and trying to find what you needed.
Yeah. The only thing that caught me was quite a bit, and the only thing that I could see being an issue is with Veil of the Void was some analysis paralysis, because the options are basically endless.
Yeah.
So, I mean, having some templates or having something that's a step-by-step. And I think he actually has that on his site.
Yeah, he does.
He has like a set of quick start rules that make it much simpler. Like, here's a good way to build this. Here's a quick way to build that. We just messed up and forgot to actually look at it. So that was kind of on us.
You were going to jump into something, Brian?
I was going to say, accessibility is key. And I know we talked about this before, that, being able to kind of understand things and jump into things is incredibly important to be able to really understand a game and to be able to engage with the game. And I think D&D, at least the DMG as it stands, really is not. I mean, if you have familiarity with how to go through reference materials, or just determination, and you're like, I'm going to understand this. I mean, I've gone through the DMG so many times, and I still find things that I'm like, I didn't know this was in here. I totally forgot this was in here.
Yep.
And it's like
almost every time.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, when on the first stream they said, well, we're going to rework the DMG and make it more organized. I saw that and I was hopeful, but it's kind of a case of I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
I do really think it needs to be organized a bit better, and it and I think even with them going to a D&D Beyond, I would like to see them do something a little bit better with being able to search singular documents. Like, I don't know if you use DMG at all on mobile. It's a little bit easier, but on the website, like your search is really limited. You're like, oh, I can search for this phrase across every single book that's out there, and I'm looking for this very specific rule, and it'll come up with like 5 different books, and I'm like, no, I want this from this specific book. So, I mean, we'll see. I think that's something they want, but ultimately, I think it's going to come down to, are people responding to the feedback, and are they saying like, this is something that's very important to us, is improved accessibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to take all that to anybody watching live, listening later, whatever, when it comes to these play tests, fill out the survey.
Yep.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what you think of your worth, your value, your opinion. Every voice counts because the more they hear the same thing from more people, the more that's going to stick, the more they're going to take that, the more they're going to run with it.
Yep.
Feedback is critical. Fill out the surveys. If you ever get asked to do feedback on it, do it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, that's I mean, that's the real reason that 5e did so well is they opened it up to the community and they were like, so we're trying to make this thing and we want your input. We want to show you things and get your feedback on it. And that was the D&D next playtest because it was the next iteration of D&D. And
Yep.
from it came 5e, which is a very, as far as D20 systems go, I wouldn't say it's rules, it's light, but I would say it's the rules kind of make sense once you start playing it. I know
Mhm.
when somebody was pitching 5e to me when I was a Pathfinder player, they were like, "Oh yeah, like everything goes down to advantage, disadvantage, and it makes rolling a lot easier." And I was like, "Huh, that does sound much easier." And if you're a Pathfinder player, you know that,
Yeah.
one, the numbers get freaking huge, and two, you
Mhm.
just at some point you end up just stacking bonuses.
So I've got
Yep.
+2 because of this. I also have this feat, so this gives me a
Yes.
+1. But we're in this situation with my friend, so they're giving me a +4. So I've got this +4, +1, +3, +5, and that was a
Mhm.
17 plus calculator.
Yep.
And that's how 3E was. 3 and
Yep.
3.5 is just big
Yeah,
numbers, chain things together, big numbers, be really excited.
Yeah.
yeah.
3 and 3.5 was very much like the 90s JRPG style numbers where it's like 9,999 damage on everything.
Oh, that makes me laugh. That's a good way to look at it.
Yep.
All right. So moving on, the other kind of recent hot topic that's been making the rounds and probably will again in like 3 to 6 months was metagaming.
Oh, I heard a bit about this.
I
I
mean,
I apparently missed it, but I talked to people that were like, did you see this stuff up here?
So, oh my goodness. Okay. So apparently, metagaming is not as universal of a term as everyone thought it was.
yeah, and
It
I mean,
means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
yeah, I think we need to like get our lexicon of what metagaming should be defined as before we start poking at the wide minutia of what actually is metagaming. Because in my opinion, you can't play a TTRPG without metagaming because you're not your character.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I saw was the biggest problem here was we were trying to figure out the definition of metagaming, and some people have different definitions than others. Like one
Yep.
of the big things that I saw come up was people talking about like how do you approach combat? Do you allow people to talk to one another while combat is going on? And there were some people that came down and were like, no, that doesn't make sense. It's a slice of 6 seconds. It's it wouldn't make sense to communicate tactics back and forth. And other people were like, nah, that kind of doesn't make sense. And for my table, it doesn't really make it a fun experience. I know I always fall down that my thought process is when I look at all of this metagaming stuff or these conversations on metagaming is your characters are spending 24/7 with each
Hmm.
other. They are doing everything together and anything together. We are speeding through that 8-hour watch.
Exactly.
They are spending 8 hours together. They are spending hours of their time just sitting at the fire, talking with one another. They are traveling for long periods of time. So there's going to be some intrinsic understanding between characters that comes up through that's really hard to emulate at the table. And for me, one of the things would be because they're fighting all the time, it would make sense if they wanted to work together that they would have a general idea of tactics with one another.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It,
in my my game I've been running for, about over 4 years now. Like whenever they say, "Can we like strategize and do this?" I'm like, "Yeah, you guys have been playing like these party members have been together forever. You do this and you do this with this strategy. It makes sense to me that you've worked that out and you know that.
Hmm.
Like you the warlock has an eldritch blast that does a pushback, so you can easily have planned and have a strategy in place to use that pushback to free someone or get someone else in a better position.
Hmm.
Different things like that. That to me is not metagaming. That's strategizing. That is
Yeah.
table talk. And
Hmm.
Brian laid it out very nicely. These characters spend more time together than the players do at the table.
Yeah.
And you learn things like in real life. You learn things about people. You get to learn how they work, what tactics they like to do at whether it's in a job or in games
Yep.
or just in life. You
And
learn
if
that.
and if you've worked side by side with somebody for years, at a glance, you can tell what somebody's going to do sometimes, especially in a crisis mode.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it's not unbelievable to think that these party members might have a quick conversation via whispers and hand signals, knowing exactly, based on their propensities and history, exactly what they're going to do. But I mean, going back to metagaming, I think what we really need to isolate is what is toxic metagaming versus what is expected metagaming at the table. Because I think that the toxic metagaming is the stuff that takes fun away from the table. And I think that's going to be like a group by group basis as far as what should be accepted. Because some games, I
Yeah.
mean, like if you look at the design of Tomb of Horrors back in the day, the game was metagaming. Like the entire thing was players versus DM back in the day. But in some tables, that'll work out. But I think the thing we really need to outline is the toxic metagaming versus, like I said, what's expected around the table. Because as a player, you're going to know what bonuses mean. Your character doesn't. They know what they're good at, but they
Hmm.
don't know what those bonuses mean. So, I mean, there's going to be that degree of separation regardless, especially in 5e. In other systems, maybe not so much, but 5e.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. For me, at least at my table, my definition of metagaming has always been, what knowledge do you have of the game outside of the game
Exactly.
that your character would or would not have, where it's like, you go up against a monster and you've seen the monster before, you know that this is a ghoul,
Hmm.
but your character's never seen a ghoul, maybe. um you know is your are you going to proceed going, we have to stay back, we know that if the ghoul hits us it can paralyze us, um or are
Yeah.
you going to play into your and it gets kind of weird to figure things out and kind of how to disperse that information. Tasha's lays out some good guidelines on, it's in the parlaying with monsters section,
Hmm.
Mhm.
that it gives you kind of a quick and dirty DC check to understand monsters. And that was primarily for like what the monster would want if you wanted to negotiate with it or get past it without combat. And that's been one of my go-tos for, if they get into combat and somebody tells me they want to identify a monster, I'll immediately look at the Tasha's tables and go, "Oh, it's an aberration, so I'm going to need this check from you." Um,
Yeah. Another thing that I'll do is seed in disinformation. And what I mean by that is if the party's told that there's a bunch of like goblins or orcs out in the field, it might not actually be goblins or orcs. But that's what the peasants call them because it's something that's bestial that's been attacking things. So they'll just call it a goblin. So everything within 100 miles that might attack things, they just call goblins
yeah, I like that.
I've
because peasants
also
don't know any better.
I've also taken the stance that I do more describing of what they're encountering rather than giving names.
Yep.
So instead of,
That's
you
hard on
know,
roll 20 though.
yeah, that is hard on
Yeah,
roll 20. But like at the table or anything like that, I will take time describing the monsters instead of being like, oh, this is a goblin. Oh, this is a gnoll. Instead of a gnoll, it's like you see this large bipedal dog-like creature and it's laughing and just instead of saying outright what it is. Or one of the things I've done was I took a gorgon and I reskinned it to be a beast. all the same stats, all the same abilities. Just it was a beast instead of a metal creature. So that
Mhm.
way it did the same things. It was basically the same creature, but it looked different that way. The players didn't know what to expect and they could remove themselves from the situation. Now, I don't have a big problem with my players using like player knowledge to avoid monster things that they didn't know about. But it just I feel like it helps with the immersion into the game
Hmm.
if you can make it not obvious what they're going up against right away.
Yeah. Or, one thing that, I mean, this is a suggestion for players out there really is if you know a creature and you think it's going to be nasty and it's one of those that a new player at your table hasn't seen before, let them figure it out instead of being like, oh my gosh, blah, 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 blah. Let it be a surprise. Let them get to experience all the things you did when you first started. Because I think that's one of those metagaming things that can really just spoil the fun. Like the first time you run against a mind flayer, the first time you run against a beholder or any of those classic D&D monsters, it freaks you out because you don't know what to expect. And then afterwards, there's always that little bit of a trepidation, but I think, I don't know, letting new players experience that without speaking up is really important in my opinion.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's because we all remember like the first time that we went up against, like, let's say I remember the first time in Pathfinder that I went up against a
Hmm.
Remoraz, which, if you're not familiar with a Remoraz, it is a large centipedal like creature, um, but it lives in cold climates. And the way that it is adapted to that is it has molten hot blood that will actually burn you to the touch. And I just remember this creature was stalking us, and we finally went up against it. And one of the melee fighters went up and they sliced it. And as the blood came out, the DM like kind of described the fact that it burned them, and that just that moment where you're like, oh,
Oh.
oh no,
Oh, oh, yeah. There's just like the bad metagaming is stuff that takes that sort of thing away.
Yeah.
Or when the experienced player, like I don't, it's not all bred purposely to like be toxic or to be controlling.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes from good intentions, like when
Hmm.
the experienced player is trying to help the new player, but they're telling them what to do instead of helping them.
Yeah.
You know,
So
those sort of things are what need to be avoided and kind of be in the
yeah.
definition of this word that means I didn't realize it meant so many different things to so
Yeah.
many different people.
So, and I would kind of circle back and say, when you're at your session 0 with your DM or GM and your group of players, it might be a good idea to define the gaming context of your game that you're going to play, because that way you all can stick to your own personal definition, because I think it's so subjective. It depends on the game, the theme, the game system, because some game systems metagaming just isn't a thing. I mean, you can't metagame them, at least not in any serious context. But very, very structured game systems like 5e, 3.5 Pathfinder, those, I think the, coming up with the actual definition and context for metagaming is really important for the DM and players to do and check in, you know. But I mean, I
yeah,
don't think there's going to be a clear this is metagaming and you should all burn for it kind of definition, because it's super subjective. And like I said, it's based on your group. Like some groups may want that Diablo-esque, you know, style game, and other people want more of a story driven game. It just depends.
yeah. Yeah, that's I think you're right. It's something that you talk about before you start. You kind of
Yeah.
you come to an agreement where you're like, this is, this is okay. Talking, strategizing during combat, that's fine. You know, knowing the monsters ahead of time or knowing the monsters before your character knows the monster, that's not okay. Kind of
Yeah.
thing. But like you
Yeah.
said, it depends. It depends on a lot of factors.
Yeah. I, I was just like things I consider table talk, like things we talked about, strategizing, knowing like, okay, I've got 30 feet on this, so I know I can get these things involved. Like I would consider that strategizing table talk, but there's a group of people out there that consider that metagaming.
And that's fine as long as it's in their game and that's what they all agree on. I mean, like I said, it's so subjective. It's not something any one person can draw this map around and have everybody agree on, I don't think.
And I think that's where the argument comes from, is you have a lot of people going, well, like, my definition of metagaming is correct. It's like, no, it's gonna be subjective. It's kind of like the term railroading. Like,
Yeah.
to me, railroading means something completely different than a lot of people out there.
Or role playing.
Yes.
Well, like railroading has a negative connotation to it, but it doesn't have to be negative. Is the problem. I think Don and I talked about this in like one of our season 1 podcasts when we were describing GM terms, and like the more experienced people in the community have a negative connotation to railroading, like you shouldn't railroad your players and blah blah blah. But that's not what railroading has to be.
Yeah.
Like especially if you're doing like a one shot, you do kind of have to railroad a little bit to make sure you're not playing for too long.
Yeah.
And it's not a negative thing. It's just making it a simple set of tracks to follow.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that occasionally. But out there's a lot of people that just, you say that term and their head goes to an instant place and the conversation's already over.
Yeah. A lot of people just, they immediately assume you're talking about taking away player agency and character agency.
Yeah. Yeah, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be that. Like, railroading can just mean that, you have a fairly linear game and, you can do side quests and do things, but the game is going to kind of push you in a certain direction. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. I mean, roller coasters have rails and they're fun too.
Yeah. That's good. That's a good quote.
That's a good one. Listen, write that down.
I mean, really, it's yeah. That's always been my opinion on those. And little dirty DM secret is that a lot of games, even though they appear to not be, are in fact in some form or another on rails.
Yeah. Yeah.
Behind the curtain and the smoke.
It might not be a straight line. It might be something that goes like this, but there's usually a point you start and a point you're trying to get to. Just how you get there is not always a straight line.
Yep.
Oh. Yeah. So what else do we have out there that, like, talking about these misunderstood or commonly misunderstood terms? What else can we think of that maybe causes the same problem?
Upper and lowercase role playing.
Okay.
A lot of people think that you have to do a silly voice or an accent to role play. And while that can make really good one-dimensional characters, it's really difficult to make a truly fleshed out character by just a silly voice. I would say that describing what your character does based on their thoughts and their frame of mind is probably a more in-depth version of role playing. But that's just my own preference. And again, it's subjective. But in my opinion, role playing itself is not what the mainstream believes. I believe that it is your character does actions based on their own beliefs and thoughts and what you would think that their beliefs and thoughts are, and not what you as a player's beliefs and thoughts are. And that to me is role playing in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. And
whereas
go ahead.
Yeah,
no, you go.
I was going to say, whereas a lot of people are like, if you're not doing the voice, you're not role playing. It's like, while entertaining and fun, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, it's kind of like first person role playing versus third person role playing, and I have mixtures. I've had mixtures of those, and like you said, no way is the wrong way.
Nope. And you're not less of a person or less of a player if you do third person role playing.
It's a good what entry to role playing. I'm pretty sure this is something else Don and I went over in one of our podcasts too. When you need to role play, like, it's okay to be like, well, my character does this, or whatever your character's name is, you know,
Hmm.
you know, Bloodbreaker does this in this situation. And
Hmm.
that's a way to ease into it, to kind of get used to it.
Yep.
There's this expectation that people have developed from some of the big shows, Dimension 20, Critical Role, about what role playing is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that can get problematic if people just think that's what it's supposed to be and that's a good game, that's a good table.
It's fun
Like,
and entertaining, but it's not necessarily how everybody role
yeah.
plays.
Well, and those games are made to be entertaining. Like
Exactly.
it's still a game, but it's a production. Like Critical Role, they're all voice actors. They can do all the voices.
Yeah.
But it's a production that's made for entertainment. Their goal is to entertain an audience.
Yep.
If this is a home game that's not getting streamed or viewed, that should not be your focus.
Yep. You should be focusing on having fun and playing a role in a way that is fun for you and the table. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that can be hard to remember, especially with how popular D&D has become, along with other TTRPGs. And
yep.
you have, like you said, Critical Role, Dimension 20. You've got the numerous podcasts out there.
Hmm.
People see these, and I think a lot of people are being introduced to this for the first time, so they're kind of shaping their impressions and understandings of what a TTRPG is off of these games. And that's they can help you start to understand things, but ultimately they are playing to be um, heard or seen.
Yep.
So it is going to change things a
Mhm.
little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why you see the players in those games have no problem temporarily giving up agency to the DM because they know that it's going to be an entertaining story. They know that they have that faith in that production. Whereas a home game, you try to pull some of that stuff and you're going to have player mutinies. But yeah, it's really important to remember the difference between a production game and a home game, I think, because there's a completely different set of expectations there.
Mhm. And that's something
Yeah,
that players and GM need to understand going in. Like, we're streaming this game, so entertainment is going to be something that needs to be
Yeah.
prominent. So you need to streamline some of the stuff that maybe would happen at a table to make it more interesting to keep people engaged.
Yep. And that's
yeah,
why they have a tempo. Like if you watch, they have a tempo. You'll see one player interject when they see a lull, or you see the DM throw the scene or point the camera in a different angle so that the tempo picks up again because it's all about keeping that beat moving.
Hmm.
Where in a home game, it's like, oh, looks like everybody's getting tired. Time to grab some soda, pizza, energy drink, talk a little bit, and get back to it.
yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't make what they're doing, because I know like some people will say this and then it always comes up, well, oh, then it's scripted, and it's like that's not necessarily the case. It's just that they are playing a slightly different way because they know that they are being viewed. So
Hmm.
you might get a little
Exactly.
bit more energy, and a lot of these people, like when you get to the more professional side, they've kind of trained to do that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep.
Tempering expectations of what your game is going to be and what your audience is.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things we try to do with DGG is not make it a big production. We try to be like, hey, we don't know what we're even playing right now, so let's dive in because this is about what it would be like at a home game. But that was one of our directions we decided to go with when we were starting it up. Is we're like, let's just try to keep it close to a home game. I like that kind of theme and feel to it, where it's not a big broadcast.
Yeah, you don't have to have everything perfect and know all of the rules and all the outcomes and keep the pace just moving. You're learning something new, and it's okay for that to be seen.
And a trip. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that people's perceptions on just role playing in general, though, going back to the point, was that it's objective, just like metagaming. And if you do have questions with your group, it's good to sit down and have another session zero check in and talk about role playing and what that means at the group. because sometimes it can be awkward if you're the only third person or you're the only first person role player. It just depends. So make sure that you discuss those things so expectations have been set.
All right.
That's what I got. I don't know.
That's what you got. No,
Yeah.
that was a good one. Role play is another good one that's commonly misunderstood. You got anything on your brain, Brian?
No, I think we've touched on pretty much everything: metagame, role playing, and railroading. Those are the big ones that come up for me.
Choo choo.
The train is on the tracks. It's just like, yeah, the more that we get into this, the more like, you know that people have different opinions on things.
Mhm.
But the more you're like, I've dove into this community and seen different things, the more you see how different those opinions are and how one thing is viewed by one person is viewed completely different by another person. And so you really need to keep an open mind on a lot of these things and just not be closed off, not be super judgmental, and be like I like when I see that and I'm like, no, that's not how that is. I'd like to take a breath and be like, okay, why might they be seeing that way?
Exactly.
Like try and pull yourself away from the situation, pull yourself out, take a step back, get a bigger view from the outside and see, and I've definitely seen some things where it's like, oh yeah, that's problematic, or oh, okay, I don't agree with you. Like I had a conversation with someone where they did not like wizards because
Mhm.
wizards are just bags of flesh with spell slots was their thing. Like your wizard doesn't get anything fun or useful. You have spell slots and that's your thing and that's it. And that was their big thing. Like, if you take away a wizard's spell slots, what good are they? Like there's not a lot of fun or interesting they can do. Now I disagreed with this person and we kind of went back and forth a little bit, pointing things out. But in the end, it was just kind of like, we're on different viewpoints, but we
Mhm.
had a positive, engaging, this back and forth discussion about it. And left not being angry at one another or thinking the other person was a complete idiot.
Yep.
Because I took the time to, okay, why, like I asked some questions, and on Twitter especially, sometimes you have to put a little more into your questions to make sure that people don't interpret it the wrong way.
Yep.
So like I asked a question, I was like, not trying to be judgmental, just trying to understand trying to see your viewpoint.
Mhm.
Rather than just saying a question where if somebody's like hyped up and like ready to go, they read that and like, oh, this person's judging me. And same thing can be done with body language. Same thing can be done verbally with what you're doing when
Mhm.
you're talking to someone. I think
Yeah.
it's something that more people kind of could use that skill. And I don't know if it's even like, I guess it is kind of a skill. I mean, but the ability to just step back and look at it before you dive into arguing about it.
Yep.
I don't know. There's just a
No.
lot of I'm right, you're wrong out there in the world, and the world is not black and white.
No.
No, it's not.
Yeah. And it is interesting though how other viewpoints can kind of challenge your perception on different things. And
Mhm.
it's okay to disagree, but I think it kind of goes back to our whole like what was our primary Discord rule? Just try not to be dicks to each other when you're doing it.
Yeah.
You know?
And like you're getting your perspective challenged. To me, if either of you feel differently, like speak up. But to me, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
Yeah.
you can learn. It can broaden your horizons, broaden your worldview, and so you should get into those situations. Now, I understand that I myself personally, I am not someone that avoids conflict.
Me
I don't
either.
I don't go seeking it, but if it's there, I'm not gonna avoid it. And there's a negative connotation to conflict that is not necessarily true. Positive things can come out of conflict.
Mhm.
Conflict does not always have to be, violent or degrading or anything like that. Conflict can be a good thing.
Yep. I think
And
that's why we get along so well, Jeff, because we have a tendency to really kind of be like, nah, I don't think so. We tear into each other pretty well, I think.
But it's coming from a place where we try and understand the other
Yeah.
person, and a lot of times it comes out to a, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I get that, or it's like, well, I see that, but I just, I don't agree, and more people need to realize that things like that are okay.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want everybody to have the same viewpoint and agree on every single thing.
George did bring up an interesting one: fudging.
Uh,
That means a lot of
oh,
different things to a lot of different folks.
I thought he was just trying to be appropriate and not drop an F-bomb in the chat, but yeah, and maybe he was, I don't know, but yeah, fudging, like fudging rolls. Brian, what does fudging rolls mean to you?
That's a tricky one. That's
Without giving away too many secrets, I'm not going to say too much.
I and that's and I know everybody has their own opinions on it. But like, does the simulation break down when you roll something and you kind of want to push it in a way that kind of
Mm-hmm.
continues the game and makes it more fun for everyone? And I think there are a lot of opinions on that, and I don't think I've seen two DMs that have the same opinion. You've got some that are very much like the dice is the dice, and you follow the roll. That is how it works. And then you have other people that are like, well, like if the dice roll sucks, I'm gonna adjust it a little bit. I want everybody to have a good time. And then you
And
have
see,
people everywhere in between.
yeah, and see, I judge my die roll like mechanics and how I may or may not fudge based on things that the players tell me in session 0, like what kind of game they want to play. Because if they leave it to me, I'll roll in the open and they'll just deal with the consequences. But I've also had, games where they're like, actually, we just like a really heavy story driven one. I'm like, cool. I may not even roll dice for some of this stuff.
Yeah, like fudging is also something that can have a negative connotation to
Mm-hmm.
it,
For
which
sure.
Don just laid out an excellent reason why it isn't always. Like now, should players be fudging rolls?
Yeah, that's the inherent problem there. Is like
See, if they do it and they're like, but these are the reasons, I might be like, yeah, you succeed, but at a cost, kind of thing. But see, those are kind of like ad hoc adjustments. But if they're, I don't know, I think like it takes a special kind of player to try to want to cheat in a game that has no like tangible stakes. I don't know.
In a game where it's like winning is
The friends you make
subjective?
along the way.
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, like I think there's a place for it, but it is also, like from the GM perspective, it's knowing what kind of game your players want, just like Don said. I mean, like, you don't have to give away any secrets, Brian, but is there a situation where like this is a positive spin for you that you've experienced or used?
That's a tough one. I know that like one of the things that I'm not against doing is like if a player does something badass, like let's take for example in combat, a player does something badass and they almost kill them all. Like it's one
Oh yeah.
HP left, something like that. At that point, I'm like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you killed it. You killed it. It's the HP is average. I'm willing to go that way. Just a lot of things in mind. Like it's cinematically, it's going to be really cool. Like the player's going to feel cool, and it's going to avoid us having another round of combat. And combat goes long as
Yep.
it is.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Which, go for it, Don.
I was gonna say that's one thing we should probably do a random encounters about is how to keep our combats fun. Aside from the podcast. I mean, we'll be reiterating the podcast, but
I have plans for the next random encounters, so hopefully Brian can join us still for that one because our podcast on smoother combat that we all three of us are involved in, the second part will be out by the time we do the next random encounters, and
Yep.
I'm gonna give
Sorry
it to
for
you,
the
Don. Don, I'm gonna give it to you in the next one, so you can be ready. I will give you a time limit. I will cut you off if I need to, because I know how long you can go. But I'll give you time to talk about summons
Yay!
and pets. It's gonna happen. I'm giving it to you in the next one. And
Yeah.
so, like, for any of you listening or watching this, you should definitely watch part 1 and part 2 of our podcast, Running a Smoother Combat. Brian joined us for that, and
Mhm.
we usually try and keep our podcast on. I try and keep them like 15, 20 minutes max, something you can listen to like on the drive home. But we really got into this one, and
Mhm.
Brian joined us and ended up having to be a 2-parter, and each part was like 30-ish minutes.
Yep.
So they run a little long for what we do, because like one of the other things we try and do with those podcasts is keep them short, keep them little snippets that, if you're going to work, you can finish it on your way to work, or maybe you're
Yeah.
on your way to work and then home, you can finish it and get through one, so it's not taking forever.
I honestly think we created random encounters because we just like talking to Brian, and the podcasts were too short for that.
Shh, don't give away the secrets. There's a little bit of
Yeah.
truth to that, though, yeah, because we had so many good things and so many good topics that we would just keep going on. But like there's like, for me and for a lot of people I know, like having a podcast that's just long, sometimes
It's
you
hard
get
to focus on.
distracted. Yeah,
Yeah,
get distracted.
you get distracted, it's hard to focus on, or you're trying, like, you have your daily commute to listen to it, and that's it.
Yep.
And if it's going to take you multiple days of a daily commute to get through one,
Mhm.
like the retention from yesterday or the day before,
Yeah.
is not like, oh, so you might have to re-listen or go back to like pick something up, because your brain isn't pulling everything in.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, you got something, Brian?
No, I was just agreeing.
Well, last thing that we're going to touch on a little bit then before we kind of wrap up here is we have a possible project brewing. And also, if anybody in the chat there has a question they would like us to talk about, feel free to pop that in there. But we're trying here, like Brian and I are involved in that Creators Cove group he talked about earlier, and we're looking at trying to put together some sort of a roundtable discussion via blog. And so we have an idea here, but I don't know if anybody listening or anything has any thoughts on that. But is there like a length or a format anybody out there thinks would be something interesting for that? We're crowdsourcing a little bit here, but my thought that I have, that I'm gonna jump in and start discussing with people again now and kind of push it a little bit, because one of the things we were doing, because I talked to Brian a little about this, is we were waiting a little bit for like Nocturnes and Nightmares to come out and just get to a point like right now when there's not as much going on and things taking time. Because my thought is do it sort of like a smaller group, but do it kind of like a question and answer, where there's a question posed, one person answers it, the next person gets to read their answer and then also answer the initial question and maybe respond to something the first person said. And I'm thinking max maybe 3 or 4 people roundtabling this with someone else kind of moderating, so to speak, and then just kind of going around on a question. Another thought was just having a question and have a bunch of answers, like everybody answers the same question, but no, like they're not seeing each other's responses, and somebody just kind of gathers those into one ball and puts them onto a blog or something.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw it pop up on the Cove, and I jumped on and said, I'm down for whatever. And now it's just figuring out what that
I should
entails
really
and
hop on
how the
there.
organization goes.
You should. Well, because what we've experienced with this one here is what happens a lot of times with collaborations. Is a lot of people have good ideas and input, but people are busy. But someone needs to take the helm. They don't need to do most of the work. They don't need to be in charge of the whole project, but someone needs to light the fire.
Yeah.
Give it direction. Put the train on the tracks. We're gonna go back to like the railroad thing here. And like some people are, a lot of people I think are afraid to do that because they don't want to have too much responsibility, or they don't want to be seen as overbearing or
Mhm.
different things like that. But every good collaborative project, someone has to you know give it a push. Like if you're on a swing set, you can kind of get moving and get a little bit of thing going, but if someone gives you a push, you've got a lot more momentum to get started and go with.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So we were kind of waiting for this point, and so we're gonna dive back in because I have an idea to work out with Brian here. I don't want to say too much yet in case it goes a different direction completely.
Yeah.
But I have a thing we're gonna try and work with here. So yeah, Don, you should hop on there and join the discussion. And anybody
Yep.
else listening, like feel free to jump in there if you're a creator. There's so many different avenues, so many different things that are talked about. There's something for everybody.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just need to find the link.
Message me and I'll throw it your way. Yeah, no, if you are a creator, definitely join the Cove. It like I said, it's where Nocturnes and Nightmare, the initial crew, kind of met, and we figured out how we were doing things. So it's a great place where you can engage as much or as little as you want. You have an
Mhm.
idea that you need to run past a few people? There's a place for that. Are you looking for somebody to collaborate? There's a place for that. So it's good.
There's people that talk about editing and reading through and playtesting stuff that needs done too. So if you've got ideas and you need playtesters, or you want someone to take a look at your language or your organization or your layout, those are the sort of things that and some maybe if nobody else can help, maybe they can point you in a direction of someone that can do what you need to. There's a lot of people in there, a lot of different views, and yeah, highly encourage it. Even if you think, well, I'm just a lowly person creating stuff on my own, that doesn't matter. If you break everything down, we are all just a person creating on our own in some
Yeah.
fashion. Like, yeah, Don and I have teamed up to do this thing, but we've collaborated with Brian to do random encounters and do these podcasts.
Mhm.
But Don and I each have done stuff on our own too. And a
Mhm.
lot of what Don and I do is one of us creates something, the other person edits and gives input.
Yep. Yeah. Largely, some of the best projects ever created were by small groups of people all working together to make something awesome. So, yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, after a little detour into collaboration from where I started, which is generally how these things go, but I direct it well, I think. We're gonna wrap up this one for now. So yeah, next time, final Thursday in November. It'll be after Thanksgiving. So I don't know if we're gonna do anything on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I think we're planning to take that one off for family and different things.
That's
'Cause
probably a good idea.
Don,
I don't know. Maybe I'll sneak away and do something. We'll see.
maybe Don will need to sneak away, and he'll be like, "Dude, I got to do something. There's too many people in my house."
Yep. I'll lock up my office and I'll be like, all right, I have dice. We'll play.
But yeah, we're definitely going to hit on summons and talk a little bit about combat in the next random encounters, and then we'll see what else comes from that one. But all right, before we say goodbye and log off, we're gonna throw it back to Brian one more time to promote the project that we've talked about in the beginning, just to give it out again. I'll post a link once more.
Yeah. So Nocturnes and Nightmares, Baba Lasaga's Nocturnes and Nightmares. If you're looking to bring terror to your table this Halloween, it's on the DM's Guild. It's fantastic, and it has everything you need, anything you can possibly need. It's got stuff for players, stuff for DMs. It's currently front page of the DMG. Can't miss it. Number 4 and the most popular.
Which is amazing. That's awesome.
Yes. Oh yes.
It's awesome. It gives me a sense of like giddiness and a little bit of pride, maybe just like, I know these people. They do something awesome. Look at this. I interact with these people. I know who they are. All right. Well, yeah, check that out. Definitely. There's a link in the chat for it. And I mean, if nothing else, all you have to do is search DM's Guild and it's right there on the homepage for the most popular. So it's not hard to find. It's
Yeah.
out there. And if you have any questions, any of these creators are active on Twitter and they would love nothing more than to answer questions and talk about it.
Oh,
I
I
should know.
imagine so.
I have definitely elicited some response like, "Hey," and gotten, whole conversations and ended up with multiple of them jumping in even though I was talking to one person. So they're definitely there. So reach out and ask a question or give them props or give them feedback. Feedback. Right, right?
Feedback's always
Yeah.
useful.
And we've
Yep.
talked about this. I think it was the last random encounters. I think we talked about feedback. It's like
Yeah.
be constructive with it. Say why. Even if
Yep.
it's a negative, say why. That's what the creators care about.
Exactly.
Mhm.
If you like it, don't like it, they like that you like it. They're probably not gonna like you dislike it, but tell them why so they can improve it
Or
or,
at least,
fix it or get better.
yeah, or at
Yeah.
least understand the viewpoint.
Mhm.
Because sometimes you'll make stuff that people just aren't into, but it just depends on the viewpoint and, preference as well.
All right. Well, that's it for this random encounter. I think we've survived and
Really?
till the next one.
Oh, man. Uh-oh. All right, folks. Stay legendary and all that.
Yeah.